Listen to Abe Thompson for an hour. I'd rather fuck a blood relative.
Da, 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 da. Ladies and gents, welcome to the solo show, fresh from this weekend's guested one, on which we had the wonderful Scott Williams, waxing lyrical about everything from the Nadeem Zahawi tax scandal to what age your dad stops being your hero at. It was a pretty fun one, to be honest. It was a bit beery, very beery, in fact. A little bit more beery than I was anticipating. I had a bit of a thick head. In fact, you know what? Like sometimes it is hard. Sometimes it's difficult. Like when you're on the left of the political spectrum and you live in a 3-bed house in the home counties, you sometimes you get labelled as a champagne socialist and shit. You know, like people say stuff like, "You talk a lot of lefty shit, Aid, but what hardship have you ever known, Aid?" And let's just focus on that for a minute, shall we? Just for a moment. Like I go out in London on a Thursday night. I test my political comedy stand-up stuff in a basement bar, right? After which I get shit hammered. And then I wake up on a Friday morning with a hangover, not feeling too smart. Then I host a podcast on Friday night where usually, again, I have a few beers with whoever the guest is, you know, both on the show and then afterwards while I'm editing and uploading shit and cutting it into little clips and all that stuff. So anyway, then by Saturday morning, I am on a double hangover doing questionable weekend parenting. It is hard for us. It's hard on my kids, okay? Don't tell me politics isn't affecting me and my family, all right? So anyway, Friday was fun. And as I say, beery. And now the hangover is worn off. And here I am, back with you guys for this week's solo show, which normally would be out to Patreons on Wednesday. But I seem to be smashing them out at the beginning of the week for now. I'm sort of, you know, ahead of my time, clearly. But as I say, normally 2 shows a week. One is just me. And then the other one, I'm interviewing someone that I find interesting from the worlds of politics or journalism or academia or comedy. Oh yeah, actually, almost forgot. This episode brought to you in association with Pepsi. The choice of a new generation. The taste of the future. And if you drink Coca-Cola, you're a paedophile. No, wait, no, that is not right. That is not okay. Who approved that for broadcast? See, now this is the type of shit you're going to have to listen to. Made up adverts, right? Unless you motherfuckers help me find an actual sponsor. That is the deal. Yes, I am the first podcast host to blackmail his own listeners. Some of you are going to be listening to this like, fuck, man. Fuck! We better find him some revenue. Or we're going to have to listen to made up adverts. Shit is ridiculous. Yes, it is ridiculous. I think we should probably stop it. And what better way to stop then you help me get this shit sponsored properly. By the way, full disclosure, I do kind of have one sponsor lined up for the show, but we are still working out the details. So in the meantime, find me more sponsors and adverts so I can start dedicating more time to producing this content for you. Otherwise, it's more fake adverts for you, all right? Fake adverts like the god-awful ones you hear on, like, LBC, you know? When you're driving around doing the school run or, you know, checking in on James O'Brien, and every 7 minutes there's another one. And look, LBC, I'm sorry. Like, if you're listening to this and you work for LBC, I am sorry. Like, if you offered me a once-a-week evening show or something, I would happily take it. I would push my principles to the side. It's fine. Like, I love James O'Brien. I love Sheila Doherty, or, you know, all that stuff is great. But yes, I find your adverts light speed annoying. You are not above scrutiny on this. Like, I like some of your stuff, and you've come a long way in the last 10 years. Also, some of your programming and commissioning decisions have been abhorrent. The Katie Hopkins show. Nigel Farage, you know? probably about 60% of what comes out of Nick Ferrari's noise hole. But I would still take a check from you. I would jump on that gravy train. I absolutely would. So I don't mean to offend. But God, your adverts, man. Bugger me in the Vatican. They're so bad. But they all seem to follow the same tract. I don't know if you've noticed it. If you just, maybe you've just been listening to LBC before you jumped on this, because I did say to some people earlier, I was like, yeah, you know, if you're not up to anything after James O'Brien finishes at 1 o'clock, then, you know, that's when I'm going to go live. And it's possible you might be listening to this and you've come straight from an ad break after James OB. But they all follow the same tract, and you will recognize it now as I explain it to you. Do I need to explain it to you? I mean, I've dug myself in too deep now, so I actually need to give you an example. So, like, not all of the LBC adverts, but a lot of them, enough of them, seem to have this samey, predictable style or format. Like here's what they do, right? They take a thing that everyone can relate to, right? Like, I don't know. Feeling sad, right? That's quite a common, relatable thing nowadays, isn't it? I think, you know, feeling sad probably has strong fucking polling right now. Like, in January, in the 4th straight Conservative Parliament or whatever. Like, plus it's -4, we're all broke, there's Brexit, European wars, pandemics, the economy's fucked, and there's Coca-Cola swinging pedophiles on every street corner, like hashtag buy Pepsi. So everyone's sad, right? Everyone can relate to feeling sad. And so then that would be how you start your LBC advert. It would be like, we all feel sad from time to time, right? That's nice and broad. Everyone can relate to it. But then you drag that relatability thing into something more industry specific, right? More specific. So then you go, but sometimes that sadness can be cured with a trip somewhere fun. So now we're in somewhere more specific, but still relatable, right? But sometimes that sadness can be cured with a trip somewhere fun. You know, after the funeral, you know, like you get product specific then. Then you sort of hammer it home exactly what you're selling. This is what you should have come out with in the first 5 seconds, but you've got to make it relatable. You've got to engage people. So then you say, that's why here at Funny Freddy's fucking Softplay, we're opening an hour earlier on Fridays, and we're giving a 5% discount to families who come straight from a memorial service over the road at St. Joseph's. Right? That is a typical LBC advert. And it would maybe close off with like the sound of kids chasing each other and laughing, and then one of them would be like, I don't miss Grandpa anymore. You know, they would finish like that. You start with something broad and relatable, you highlight the industry-ish, kind of, and then you pitch your actual product. That is the kind of annoying advert you guys are getting until we get some actual sponsors. So strap in. Anyway, look, let's actually get on to some content for you. Let's jump straight in it, shall we? Do I need to go on about the Patreon? I feel like we're in too deep now to look, if you want to jump on the Patreon, it's patreon.com/Aid Thompson with an IN on the end. There you go. I'll read out the benefits and stuff towards the end of the show if you're enjoying it, right? So in the meantime, let's just get into it. So quick look at the headlines today. Quick look back on what's been going on in this this charmless ensemble cast carry-on movie that is our ruling Conservative Party. Like, I was thinking how wild it is, how myriad scandalized, if that's even the right way to say that, like how multi-textured and all encapsulating the Tory scandals are at the moment, you know? Like, everywhere you look, it's just scandal and integrity bins lying, corruption, sleaze, and stupidity, isn't it? And I know that sounds biased, obviously, but it's kind of inarguable at this point. Like, just in the cabinet right now, like, let's take a look at some of the names, shall we? Justice Secretary, sent out on the rounds over the weekend to defend Nadim Zahawi, right? This is Dominic Raab, Justice Secretary, who himself was being pressured to resign only about 4 weeks ago for a full in-trays worth of bullying complaints from his time as Foreign Secretary and Justice Secretary before. It's like, you know, imagine, put yourself in the position of the journalist that's interviewing him on, what was it, like Saturday morning or Friday morning? Like, yeah, but Mr. Raab, do you think Mr. Zahawi should offer his resignation? Do you? Well, no, because he was just being a bit careless, and he's actually a very successful businessman. Okay, all right, but follow-up question, if I may, why should a justice minister who himself is being pushed to resign for his own ministerial conduct, why should that person's opinion hold any water on whether another minister should have to resign or not? Like, why are you here? Like, why is a guy who should have been gone a month ago himself out on the rounds? Like, well, I think the other shamed minister should stay. Well, of course you do. I reckon Epstein probably thought Weinstein was all right, you know? Of course you do. Because if ministers have to start resigning for reasons of integrity or lack thereof, you wouldn't even be sat there to answer the question. You'd just be empty-chaired, right? We'd be in a causality loop or some shit. Like, do you think Zahawi should resign for reasons of integrity? Yes. And then Raab vanishes like the older brother in the Polaroid in Back to the Future, you know? Poof, gone. So that's Raab. Then you had Michael Gove out the other day. Was that a week ago or 10 days ago? He was on the broadcast rounds. Gove was pictured off his nut in a nightclub in Scotland, which, good for him. By all means, celebrate. If I was divorcing Sarah Vine, I'd be gurning my tits off, leading a fucking carnival through Whitehall, right? I would be. But as a government minister, you know, is that becoming conduct of a government minister? And then there was the whole, you know, behaving erratically on a breakfast TV interview thing, you know? Like, Gove is shady and snaky as fuck, man. And that's before we even go into, like, his involvement with Vote Leave and the Brexit referendum. Who else have we got? James Cleverly. James Cleverly is our foreign secretary, right? James Cleverly was in charge of the department that changed the verified Conservative Twitter account to Fact Check UK in the middle of a GE debate. That's his scandal that he's never really been hauled over the coals for. Who else have we got in the great offices of state? Suella Braverman dismissed the concerns of a Holocaust survivor the other day and made no apologies for having used, frankly, Goebbels-esque rhetoric. Like, they're all just drenched in scandal and stupidity, just hosed down, hard and feathered with cretiny, and then pushed out onto podiums for the country to laugh at. Like, that is how it feels. At least, you know, to those of us still capable of critical thought or something approaching it. And fuck, like, of course, it doesn't just stay with the supporting cast, right? You've got prime ministers drenched in scandal. Like, you got Sunak and his wife's non-dom stuff, and both of them applying for green cards while he was still Chancellor. And then you've got the more recent allegations of him being out of touch, and the seatbelt, and the private plane, and private doctor. Not like, there's just so many scandals and missteps and fuck-ups And of course, you know, how can we talk about a dearth of political integrity without including the big dog himself? And indeed, his newest addition to his back catalogue of missteps and scandals, which, you know, I don't know if you caught it over the weekend. I'm sure if you're listening to this show, having seen tweets and, you know, me promoting on Twitter or whatever, suggests that you're on Twitter and you're into politics, so you probably have done. But just in case you haven't, it appears that Boris Johnson may have given the job of BBC chairman to his mate, who helped him secure an £800,000 loan to fund his lifestyle while in number 10. That appears to be what has happened. Like, yo, could you give me £800,000? Oh, you can't. Oh, well, here's a cushy roll at the bead, bro. Like, there's so many scandals engulfing the Tory party, and the polls are just deadly to them at the moment. There's projections that they're essentially facing a wipeout at the next general election, right? And so a lot of them think that their best hope is to reinstall Boris Johnson as leader. You know, your Fabricants, your Dorries, your Bring Back Boris lot. Like all the guys who, you know, when he announced that he was going to go for the leadership before, and suddenly you saw all of these people wearing like Bring Back Boris t-shirts, hashtag Bring Back Boris, like all of that lot. They really think that Johnson is their best hope for the next election campaign. And more puzzlingly, like, you have people like Mail on Sunday columnist Dan Hodges saying essentially that Labour are worried about Johnson returning. I don't know if any of you saw that yesterday. He's like, Labour are worried about a Johnson return, and they should be. I'm just like, yeah, really? You honestly think Labour are worried about Boris coming back? Really? Like, I know there are people who want him back in the driving seat, you know, not least of which that IT magnate guy who donated £1 million to the office of Boris Johnson, right? I mean, he must truly believe that the fucking horny albino yeti's on his way back to number 10, right? That's the only explanation for donating £1 million to the office of Boris Johnson Limited. But why they think that is a fucking mystery to me. Because I'm reading Hodges' headline, right? Dan Hodges, Mail on Sunday. Labour are scared of a Boris return, and they should be. And I'm like, mate, Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority and proved to be so shit at being Prime Minister. Like, so corrupt, so punch drunk on power, that within 2 years, he'd tried to, disband the Standards Committee. He'd overlooked reports about someone being a sex pest and made him chief whip anyway. Like, there's Partygate, there's second job stuff. Johnson's leadership saw his 80-seat majority reduce again and again at every by-election. Like, his approval rating and poll lead collapsed like fucking buildings on 9/11. Like, it suffered the worst local elections in decades. Tory strongholds went to Labour. The guy is fucking voter kryptonite. He's a huge voter turnoff. He's like the opposite of Viagra or some shit. Right? Like, it's like, oh, hey, Labour are scared of a Johnson return. Oh, yeah, mate. Yeah, oh, sure. Yeah. I'm sure they're quaking in their boots. I'm sure they're terrified. I mean, we laugh at Tory funding and dodgy donations, but honestly, like, if it turned out that Labour were behind that £1 million going into Johnson's office, right, I would be like, fair fucking play. That is some strategic cuntery right there. Chess, not checkers. Like, we would actually be really comfortable with Boris Johnson going for the leadership again and leading you into the next general election. That could work out really well for us. Would you take £1 million check from Labour? I wonder if is there a law against Labour donating to the Tories? I mean, look, I don't think it's impossible that Boris Johnson could become leader of the Conservative Party again. I think that is within the realms of possibility. I think he probably had the numbers before, to get on the ballot when he flew home that time. But I just think he was probably warned that if he went for the leadership then he would be found guilty of lying to Parliament, and, all of that committee business would ruin it for him, and he'd just have to resign again, right? So instead, he has to play the long game. Like, I truly think that's what's happening here. He has to wait for all that shit to just air out. He has to wait for people to get a bit bored of the lying stuff, of Partygate, and now this, BBC deal corruption-y stuff. And then once that's all died down, he makes the move, right? Like, everyone, including me, has been wondering, why is he flying to Davos? Why is he flying out to Ukraine? Does he think he's still prime minister? Or, like, do they think he's still prime minister? Did they not get the memo? But here it is, right? I figured it out. It all ties in perfectly. He keeps himself high profile, right? On the front pages, like the Times, the Telegraph, Express, the Mail, right? None of them are covering any Rishi Sunak stories or policies or initiatives or responses to anything today. They are all plastered with pictures of Boris Johnson meeting Vladimir Zelensky. All of them are. And the reason they're doing that is so that in 6 months, right, or in a year, when it comes to this leadership challenge, when they're ready to strike, if you like, they can then say, look, if we want a statesman, if we want a leader, if we want to be respected on the world stage, ask yourself this: who was out in Ukraine drinking vodka with Zelensky, yeah? Like, who does Ukraine love? Who was out in Davos driving forward the World Economic Forum agenda? That is what they'll say. And then, right, then they'll contextualize it, and they'll say, what's Rishi Sunak's globe-trotting geopolitical international credentials? What was he doing while Johnson was flying off to Davos and Ukraine? What was he? Oh, yeah, that's right. He was catching a private plane from London to Leeds. That is what they'll say. That is where this is headed. I promise you. In case you wanted a bit of, future-y prediction, sports almanac kind of shit going on. 2 Back to the Future references in one show. Wow. Another thing I read over the weekend was that Boris Johnson is very keen to become prime minister again because he feels he has unfinished business. Which I have to say I love. I am here for the unintentional unself-awareness, right, of him suggesting he has any concern whatsoever with finishing the job with anything. It's just on another planet hilarious. Brexit's not finished, Ukraine ongoing, lay down in front of bulldozers to stop the third runway, Are you going to lay down in front of the bulldozer? No, I'm probably going to fly away on an unnecessary trip to do something else that day. Even though you committed to... Yeah, I don't care about that anymore. I saw a great tweet from Marina Purkis about this the other day. What's up, Marina, if you're listening? She was like, Johnson says he has unfinished business, and that's why he wants to become PM again. And she's like, it's hardly surprising considering what a useless, lazy sack of shit he was. Like, right? The idea that he's going to finish any job that he starts rather than just get distracted and run off hornily chasing after one of his, like, junior PAs or some shit. This idea that he's like, I don't like leaving things unfinished. Oh, okay. All right. Sure you don't. That is actually quite refreshing, Boris. I will call your ex-wife now and let her know that you'll be spending more time with your kids. Oh, but hold on a moment. Do you think... here's a question for you guys. Do you think Boris Johnson has such a failure to comprehend the concept of finishing the job, because the only thing he associates the phrase finishing the job with is the times he's been fired. Like, do you think that's what, like, you know, like, to you and me, finishing the job is sticking around to complete the project or task or whatever. To Johnson, it's like, this job is, you're finished. You have finished it. Just, here's a box, pack up your shit and get the fuck out. Like, just the mention of finishing jobs is like, all right, Boris, are you going to finish the job? Don't say, you know, breaks out in hives, stresses that he's been found out for making up quotes again, like he's going to lose his income and get another CCJ or something. Like, that CCJ shit was wild, wasn't it? Do you remember that? Some journalist somewhere whose name has been lost in the ether. Excuse me, quick swig. I say his name's been lost in the ether. You know, really, what I'm saying is that I haven't researched his name. I'm sure someone out there knows who it was that found this out, but if you're listening to this, I don't know who you are. I think you worked for Private Eye from memory, but whoever it was, you should get a fucking Pulitzer or something. This journalist had this thought just pop in their head, like, hang on, this guy is chaotic as fuck. This Boris Johnson chap. We all know people like Boris Johnson, just chaotic with money, right? Like, they could earn 30k, 100k, or 800k on a loan, or $1 million from speeches in the last couple of months. However much they earn, they're always broke and panicking and complaining to their dinner guests, their own dinner guests, about the cost of the food that night and how they have to pay for it. Just chaotic, right? And so this journalist goes, I wonder if he's got a CCJ. And he looks it up. And boom! There it is, a county court judgment issued to the Prime Minister and sent to the official residence of 10 Downing Street. Like, can you imagine if that had happened to a Labour PM? All the connotations of being bad with money. You know, well, if Starmer can't even manage his own money, how are we supposed to trust him with the economy? It'd be all of that shit. It'd be 2 weeks of Hodges headlines in the Mail. How Starmer's fine shows the Labour leadership are still not ready for government. It'd be all that stuff, right? And yet, what happened with that CCJ thing? Like, it just went away, didn't it? Just another episode in the box set series of Tories getting into trouble. You know, it's the sort of trouble that for you and me would be the starting point in a downward spiral towards what, like fucking debt management and shit credit and hiked interest fees and mortgage rejections, and then you can't get a mortgage because you're not passing the affordability checks and the credit checks and shit, and the next minute you're propelled out into the private rental sector, so now you're just doomed to blow 2/3 of your income on rent and be broke forever, and yet in Tory circles it just goes away, you know? Like, I'd love to get the inside scoop on that one. Like, what emails were sent? What pressure was applied? Like, how do you just get a CCJ struck out? I think that was the phrase. Like, whose call is it to be able to say that the embarrassment of the British Prime Minister having shit credit is just too much for the country to take? So we just have to strike out this matter. Like, whose call is that? Who gets to decide that? Who do we have to send an FOI request to get an understanding of what boxes need to be ticked for the local authority to go, yeah, no, that is too much. That is embarrassing. But that's not who we are. And he is all of us. He's Brit, you know? Anyway, I don't know if you guys remember that. It was fishy as fuck. I remember it because there was one line in the reporting of it that made me go, hang on a fucking minute. Like, Like it said, and don't quote me on this because this isn't Panorama, okay? And frequent viewers and listeners will know that I have a habit of butchering quotes and paraphrasing, but I'm pretty sure it was reported like Johnson CCJ struck out, and then it said number 10 had called the claim, the CCJ itself, vexatious and without merit, right? And number 1, I'm like, well, that's not up to you. That's up to whoever the local authority is, surely, right? But then it said like the district judge decided it wasn't valid, but then that they were unable to provide further details, which is just like, why? Why are you unable to provide further details? Like, this guy was the fucking prime minister, and he's in debt, or has a debt lodged against his name, or, you know. And I think I remember it from back then that in order for the CCJ to be issued, it has to be approved by the local authority first, which must have meant there was something to it, right? But just away it went. And we're not able to provide any further detail. Like, is this a national security risk? Why the fuck are you... Well, we can issue something, but it's heavily redacted across 98%. Why? On what basis? And I suppose the reason that this sort of thing is, you know, fresh in my mind at the moment is because it's the same kind of shit that's happening again with the current crop, the current cabinet, the Conservative Party, the new class, or whatever. You've got Nadhim Zahawi this week. Fucking £4 million tax bill, negotiates a penalty, negotiates it with them. And the same shit that would land you or I in prison, probably, you know, he just writes a check, you know, probably sells a horse or two to pay for it and does an after-dinner speaking gig, and woof, away it goes. Sunak pictured without his seatbelt. Fixed penalty for the second time. He should be ejected from number 10, right? And then they call a general election. But away that will go too. You know, he might pay the fixed penalty, but it's not even about what he's got the fixed penalty for. It's about a culture of a lack of repercussion or whatever, you know? And it's funny because we spend so much time in the UK and the US railing about cancel culture. And a lot of us clap back on it, don't we? We say, no, it's consequence culture. You say something dumb and they cancel your show. That is a consequence of your stupidity, bro. Like, but honestly, just, you know, stop the grandstanding for a minute, right? Just let all the hot air in your lungs just exhale for one moment and just sit with me, right? And explain to me how in the name of all that is holy can you pretend cancel culture is a thing when you've got law-breaking prime ministers and chancellors and former prime ministers, and the repercussions to their actions start and stop at, you know, yeah, just make it go away. Yeah, shush. Just off it goes. Yeah. Yeah, they won't provide any further details. It's fine, you know? Well, you can't do that. The standards committee won't like. Well, disband it then. It's fine. It's over. The end. Curtain down. Credits roll. Well, you can't get a loan for almost £1 million and pay it back by shoehorning your mate in as the chairman of the BBC. What are you talking about? Yes, of course I can. Well, you'll be all across all of the newspapers. No, I won't. Like, they'll just run front pages of me in a war zone looking like a statesman. It's like, you can't lie to the Queen and then pretend to be a royalist over Harry and Meghan. Like, the papers will eat you alive. You'll be branded a hypocrite. No, they won't. No, you're right. Absolutely. You won't be. There are zero consequences. Like, what a life that must be to lead. To just know the chances of you having to resign are almost zero. Like, even now, right? Like, even after Sunak stood outside, like number 10, saying we're going to, restore honesty, integrity, accountability, right? That's supposed to be the political period that we're in right now. Honesty, integrity, accountability. Even now, like Suella Braverman is basically like, up there on a podium like, look, I'm sorry they made your father dig his own grave before they shot him and made his best friend bury the body. I'm sorry that happened, okay, to people like you. But that's the actions, lady. Those are the actions they took. I'm just using the words, all right? Words are not actions. You understand? Like saying, I think you're a disgusting swarm of invading cockroaches is not the same as actually killing 5 million people. All right? It's not the same. Stop conflating my words with other people's actions. Just because they are essentially the same words the Nazis fucking used in the opening chapters of their period of murderous terror. Like fucking Suella Braverman's taking on some mid-90s gangster rap defences, isn't she? It's like, look, they're just words. It's just I give the people what they want to hear, It is just like mid-90s gangster rap. They just say something hugely volatile. And what's the word? Just something that's designed to provoke and incite. And then, somebody listens to it. Someone is emotionally immature and morally bankrupt and traumatized in a myriad ways and got their own issues. And then they hear this shit and they pick up an AR-15, and they spray the kids in the neighborhood that wear the wrong colors. And then the rapper's like, well, nothing to do with me. I just wrote the words, I just said the words to the highly impressionable and at times certifiable, highly medicated people. Like, it's not my fault. That is Braverman, the gangster rap of British politics. I just said the horribly emotive, racially charged dog whistles. How was I supposed to know that it would lead to a guy tossing a Molotov cocktail over the fence of the processing centre? I could never have known. Who could have predicted that? Who could have predicted that emboldening racists with Nazi rhetoric might have resulted in someone throwing a Molotov cocktail over the fucking fence of a processing centre? I'm surprised we're even connecting these events. They're obviously completely different and wildly unconnected. But again, no repercussions, of course. She's still in her job. There's no talk about Sunak firing her, just away it goes. Like, what a life you could lead. Like, honestly, between, tax avoidance and lying to Parliament and inciting attempted murder and bribery, corruption, misuse of public funds, Russian interference, like doing deals with adversarial states, accepting money from Russians like Lyubov Chanukin, who's married to Putin's former finance minister and is, I think, the biggest donor to the Conservative Party over the last decade. And she's still donating after the sanctions. And then the close relationship between Kwarteng and his ex-boss at the hedge fund who made a killing on the mini budget. Like, all of it stinks to high heaven and nothing happens. Like, all of these things that would land anyone else in jail. Like, it just makes you wonder, does it? Like, how far are we right now from a cabinet minister getting exposed as a wife-beating drunk driver or something, right? And it just goes away, We're in that neighborhood, guys. Like, if it turned out that Jeremy Hunt had pushed his wife, like, grabbed her by the face and pushed her into the breakfast bar, like, look, it's 3:30 for a coffee now. Like, if he was that, mean spirit, like, if it came out that Hunt was some sort of domestic pimp slapping motherfucker behind closed doors. Behind the doors of number 11. Like his wife pushed him too far one day and he just split second slaps her. You know, if he was pimp slapping his wife, shouting stuff like, who's king? Who's king of this castle? Say it. Say my name. Say King Jeremy. You know, and this one time that he's slapping her around, there's a cleaner there who overhears it, right? And she reports it to someone. And then it leaks out. And the papers get wind of it, right? Like, what would happen now, you think? Given that he's such an essential component to the stability of the economy and that Sunak doesn't want to lose any sort of, you know, centre-right types from his government. Like, the Tory party is already full of fucking frothing headbangers. He can't afford to lose one more relative moderate. He doesn't want to lose him. If it came out that Hunt was pimp-slapping his wife, what do you think would happen? We already know what would happen, right? And look, I'm not suggesting for a moment that Jeremy Hunt is like that. I don't think there's any suggestion that he is a wife beater, right? He's not really like physical looking, is he? He's more sort of shipman kind of, you know, psychopathic lawyer energy, I think. Like, he wouldn't beat his wife to death. He'd poison her. He'd have her cremated against her own wishes so then they couldn't test the blood. Like, that's the vibe that I get from Jeremy Hunt. But if he did beat the shit out of her, we know how that would be handled already, don't we? Like, first, you know, the Telegraph, Express, the Mail, they would all run with stories about something else entirely. They would all just look the other way. Like, today, right? But the former Prime Minister is accused of bribery, essentially, with the BBC job stuff and the 800 grand loan. And the former Chancellor has been accused of tax avoidance to the tune of about 4 million. And yet neither of those are anywhere on the front pages. There's no, like, follow-on stories or no further questions or Zahawi row deepens or it's some shit about, you know, Britain's something for nothing culture and universities and their ties to China or whatever. And Johnson on the front line in Ukraine. So it would be distractions and other stories rather than Jeremy Hunt detained or questioned over pimp slappery. You'd have people on the broadcast round saying shit like, I've worked with Jeremy for many years, and in the cut and thrust of parliamentary life, sometimes emotions run high. It would be shit like that. Or it'd be, you know, Dominic Raab again on the broadcast round saying, look, I've worked with Jeremy a long time. He takes his work very seriously. And then he would say, I can't speak for, or he would say it's not something I would do, but it's important to respect their privacy. Like, they would just dodge and duck it and obfuscate. It would not be taken seriously or in any way that respected victims of domestic violence. It just wouldn't be. That is where we're at now. If, touch wood, it doesn't happen, but if somebody like Jeremy Hunt was questioned for something like that, do you honestly think it would be, do you think Sunak would sack him or ask for his resignation? I don't know if he would. There would be some other story that would be propelled onto the front pages. The pressure would then thus not be there to demand further answer. I mean, the Mirror and the Guardian would apply pressure, but the Mirror and the Guardian are just the Mirror and the Guardian, right? They're not, you know, the Sun, the Telegraph, the Mail, the Express, the Star. Like, you know, it's, you know what? Here's a wild thought for you. A lot of people talk shit about the right-wing rags, right? Me included. And how, you know, working for the Sun or the Express or whatever might decimate your chances of being thought of as a serious journalist. Do you think that's fair to say? You know, like your reputation of being, how people perceive you as being a serious journalist, I think would be impacted if you said, yeah, I worked at the Sun for a couple of years. I think. Maybe I'm being unfair, I don't know. But truly, if you ever wanted to be propelled to a front page story before any of your peers from your journalism or English degree, right? Go and work at one of them. Because I swear to God, when there is an actual news story that your political editor probably should be covering, You know, like the Zahawi tax row, like this fucking, I don't know, what's the other? Oh yeah, the Boris Johnson BBC thing. Rather than them going with that shit, they will take your before it's ready culture war non-story and put that on the front page. Before your time. And then, what, you can say that you've had a page one exclusive before you turn 26. Like, hey, Danny, I know you've only been working here for a week, and the nuts and bolts of your story is basically that some students go to that uni who are Chinese and that the university has a relationship with a Chinese university. I know it's not really much of a story. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's page one material, to be honest. Yeah, I know. But if we put your shit on page one, we won't have to draw any attention to this other hugely embarrassing thing for the guy that I go golfing. But, like, that is how that shit ends up on page one. I swear to God. Then 4 a.m., the papers are getting printed. It's like, exclusive! Universities links to China. Like, do you think that's why they have such a warped idea of, you know, like, if you put yourself in the shoes of that, like, young, I guess, sort of nepotisty journalist, right? Whose story that is not ready, that is just, you know, this fucking universities links to China. Like, all universities link with other universities internationally. All universities have international students. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's such a non-story. But if you were, like, the 23-year-old kid who was told to go and look, and then it was propelled to page one, do you think that's why people like that have such a warped idea of work hard and get on? You know? Like, maybe I need to explain it a bit better, but, like, for you and me, to work hard and get on would probably mean downsizing to a one-bed flat, living in it with your partner and the 2 kids in a shoebox, stinging nettles and rainwater for dinner every night. You work 2 jobs and you do an evening course, you know, to try to self-improve and better your situation. And maybe if you don't have too many holidays, you might be able to blag your way onto Help to Buy in 10 years, right? That, for most people out there, is working hard to get on. But for these motherfuckers in the right-wing press and in their, you know, country club circles, for them, I swear, like, hard work and get on starts at, well, my dad said that, yeah, if I wash and hoover the Bentley, like, once a week, he's going to put me forward for an internship at my Uncle Lewis's newspaper, right? It's just, you know, I washed the cars, so therefore I got the internship. Like, that is hard work, and it helped them to get on, right? And it ends, that's where it starts, and it ends at propelling their shit non-story to a page one world exclusive, right? It's like nepotism and then over-promotion in 5th gear, but that is hard work and getting on for many on the right. So then when they're faced with, as indeed they were this morning, right? I don't know if you saw the Mail's hysterical front page that wasn't about Nadeem and wasn't about the BBC. Their front page was about Britain's something for nothing culture. You know, like, this is this idea that millions of people are claiming more in benefits than they pay in tax, right? Which obviously they feed into because they're worried about benefits, scroungers and stuff. They're not worried about Nadeem's fucking £4 million, which could have, you know, fueled the economy or could have supplied nurses or could have improved schools or whatever. It's all about benefits, scroungers rather than tax avoidance, for obvious reasons, given that the Mail is based offshore and pays fuck all tax. But I digress. But if we focus on this sort of Britain's something for nothing culture, right, to me that indicates a lack of opportunity, a lack of skills training. You know, probably a huge number of people on pensions too, aging population, the labour shortage. These are all complex problems that could probably benefit from, you know, at least a temporary easing on immigration restrictions, right? But if you're a Tory headbanger and you came up that route, you know, internships and propelling your shit, non-story to page 1 before you had earned it or before you were ready for it. Like, if you came up that route, but psychologically you felt like you had worked for all of that, right? Because you cleaned the family car 5 times and then you're over promoted with shit before you should have been. Like, if you came up that route, if you were that kind of person, you might think that these millions of people just need to work hard and get on, right? It's a weird sort of psychological, it's kind of trauma as well. Like, you've been conditioned to think that you worked hard and that's why you're now editor of this right-wing paper. Like, no, mate. I don't know how you solve that problem, by the way. I don't know how you get people like that to climb down, you know, and to accept, God, I sound like such a raging lefty today, but to accept their privilege, to acknowledge that it's actually not just a result of them working hard and getting on. Like, imagine actually having that conversation, like, you know, like, bro, I know you love to tell yourself that you worked hard for all this, for this fucking 6-bed country pile and, you know, the offices and your Pierre de Terre and Tower Hamlets or whatever that you stay in 4 nights a week when you're staying late. I know that you like to tell yourself that you've worked hard for all of this, but let me show you the cold, hard, crushing truth. Which is that you were kind of gifted this. And there's people who work a lot harder than you who were never in with a fucking chance of getting it because of how they spoke. Or because they couldn't afford to do the internship because the train cost too much. Or like, I don't know if you would want to wake up from that. Like, if your ego and your perception of your own achievement were challenged and you had the choice of like, okay, well, I guess I could accept that I'm not actually as, you know, achievement-y and impressive as I thought I was, even though all of fucking sexuality in society tell me that I need to be this sort of achievement machine, and that's why women will like me, and that's how I get the big house. And it, like, even though all of that is important and I'm obsessed with it and I think about it every day, I have to accept that I'm not actually that important or achievement-y. God, I'm running out of words today. But you know what I mean? Like, would you want to wake up from that sort of, I'm really trying not to say Matrix style sort of, you know, delusion, but that is kind of what it is. Anyway, guys, I should probably wrap it up there. Thank you so much for listening. That is it for this one. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. I put out 2 shows a week, one solo, like this one, and one with a guest on. Recent guests include Gemma Forte, Dane Baptiste, who you might have seen on Live at the Apollo, Young Pagoda, Otto English, Super Tansky. There's loads of them. There's like 144 episodes, including this one. So knock yourselves out. Go and have a flick through them. There is a Patreon. I mentioned that nearer the beginning of the show. It starts at £3 a month, which is just enough for a goddamn coffee, according to Jeremy Hunt. And who are we to disagree with him, right? Nobody wants to get pimp slapped. So, yeah, £3 a month is where the Patreon starts. That's patreon.com/Aid Thompson. And you get the podcast episodes 2 days early once you sign up to that. You get access to the Discord channel. That's sort of instant messaging, like live chat. I pop in there every day and we talk shit about politics and love, life, the universe, dystopia, and what else is there? There's an in-person like London meetup. We did one in October where I drank too much tequila and felt rather unwell the next day. The next one is probably going to be in March. We're just firming that one up at the moment. I might push it back to April, April, so that more people can make it. But also there's live gigs too. Myself, Super Tansky, Danny fucking Price, Denise Headley, among others. We're all appearing at this thing called Riot Society on February the 10th in Soho. It's sold out, that one, but there will be others, probably quite soon afterwards. And if you want first look at the tickets for shows like that, I put that on the Patreon too. So there's loads of shit happening. You also get named and shamed at the end of shows like this when I say shit like, thank you so much to all of the Patreons for continuing to support the show. You guys rock my world. Really, really loving our chats in the Discord channel, and I'm looking forward to meeting those of you that I didn't get to meet at the October meetup. I'm going to meet you guys at the gig in Soho, so we've got that to look forward to. But just quickly, one by one, thank you to Anthony, Pingu, David, Alex, Chris, and Rax, and then Ricardo, Silent, T-Rex, Oliver, Sarah, and Kerry. Thanks again. I'll be back this coming Friday at 7:30 for the live stream with my guest Lucy Lucraft. Make sure you catch that. That's live at 7:30. You could jump on the stream, but then it vanishes onto Patreon for 2 days for the reasons that I've just covered. Weren't you listening? Jesus. So yeah, it'll be on Patreon for 2 days after that. So yeah, if you want to jump on the live stream, that would be great. We'd love to have you. But if you do miss the live stream at 7:30, you missed your chance. Then you have to wait 2 days for it to re-emerge on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Until then, keep it booge, keep it strictly #Binfluencer. I'm outie.
Listen to Abe Thompson for an hour. I'd rather fuck a blood relative.